I am confident that we are going to be able to get the START debated and completed before we break for the holidays.
Well, this is a very important issue with me. It's about nuclear arms control and about possibly getting back into a big fight with the Russians. I don't want to be there. I grew up with that fight, hiding under my school desk. Anyway, that was President Obama last week expressing confidence that he could push through this New START treaty, it's called, in the lame duck Congress this fall. And now Senate Democrats believe they have the 67 votes needed to ratify the treaty. That's what it takes, 2/3 of the Senate to ratify a treaty. They're pushing to begin debate on this agreement, this nuclear arms agreement with the Russians as early as tomorrow, despite resistance from some Republicans. Lawrence Eagleburger is, of course, one of the 6 former Republican secretaries of state who's urged the Senate to ratify, and Doug Feith questions the new treaty. He served as Undersecretary of Defense during the Bush administration. Mr. Secretary, Eagleburger, I want you to tell us, why is it important, urgent, on all the counts you can think of, for this to be ratified this fall?
I think it's important that it be ratified fall or early next year. I'm not one of those who feels it has to be done in this lame duck session. I would prefer it to be done then, but if you'll notice in that piece that all these secretaries of state Republicans once did here recently, we didn't argue about when it should be done. We simply said it should be ratified. I still believe that, but I don't want to do it if in fact what it's going to do, I don't want to do it now if in fact that's going to kill it. If we can get it through, fine, but otherwise I want to wait until next year.
Well, here's the list of prominent Republicans who voiced support for the START treaty. Here they are: former President George Herbert Walker Bush, Henry Kissinger, George Shultz, James Baker, Eagleburger, Brent Scowcroft, Colin Powell, Condoleezza Rice, and former Secretary of Defense William Cohen. I think Jim Baker's on the list somewhere there. Doug,
yeah,
Mr. Secretary, let me go to Doug. Let me go to Doug on this question. What's the problem with this? Why are you questioning it?
Well, I think a number of those Republican officials that you mentioned also raised questions about the treaty. The treaty establishes a link, what they call an interrelationship between offensive force reductions and missile defense. This is something the Russians have been asking for years. They tried it when I helped negotiate the predecessor treaty. The Bush administration said no, that's harmful to the United States, but the Obama administration said yes. The other thing is that the treaty has counting rules, these very complex counting rules that have the effect of imposing penalties if we want to convert long-range nuclear systems into long-range conventional systems.
But the Pentagon says it's better to just create new rockets, new ICBMs, if you're going to use them for conventional purposes. Mr. Eagleburger, isn't that the case that there isn't a problem here because the Pentagon preferred just to create new weapons?
I don't think there's a problem on either of those 2 points. Number one, you're correct. The Pentagon says they would prefer to do new ones anyway, so that's not the issue. On the other hand, this so-called linkage is just not there, and we have said it's not there, and that we don't accept the Russian argument that it is there. So we, as far as we're concerned, it's not there, and it's going to stay not there.
Okay, let me ask you for Russia. Let's go back to more fundamental questions.
There's a key factual point here. If you look at Article 5, Section 3 of the treaty, there are limits. There's a limit on missile defense, and then there's also the preambular language. So I mean, it's just not accurate to say it's not there.
I know for years the Soviets always wanted to avoid missile defense because they thought we had the electronics, the ability to actually create such a system, and they knew they didn't. I think that's probably why we ended the Cold War, right? Well, because we basically bluffed them or convinced them, Reagan did, that we could possibly put up a shield against all their ammo, and they said, whoa, we better call it quits.
Well, there's no question that our technology is a lot better than theirs, and we have technology that's worked very, very impressively in the missile defense area.
Okay, let me ask you about the basic gut feeling about, Mr. Eagleburger, do you think we face a geopolitical threat from Russia today in any way? Are they our enemy or even potential enemy in the world?
Oh, I suppose they're a potential enemy. They are not now an enemy, and I think that where they pose a problem is that things like maybe some handing over some nuclear secrets to Syria or something like that. In that regard, yes, they are a problem. But in terms of the way it used to be that the two superpowers facing each other, no, that's no longer the case.
Doug?
I agree with Secretary Eagleburger on that.
Well, let me ask you positively then. Don't we need the Russian alliance on issues like Afghanistan, issues like Iran, the sanctions, toughening the sanctions, helping us do the battle we have to fight in Afghanistan as long as we're there.
Well, you say, don't we need them? We don't have them on a lot of those things.
We don't?
It would be desirable to have Russian cooperation. And I'm all in favor of trying to improve cooperation with Russia. But the Russians have been very unhelpful on Iran, with the exception of one cancellation of a arms sale to them, which was good. But in general, they've been unhelpful. And they're unhelpful in a number of other areas. I'm all in favor of trying to cultivate better relations. But this particular treaty has some serious problems. My view is the problems about this treaty should be looked at seriously. Part of the answers to them may come if the administration releases the record, which it's refused to do. I don't think it makes any sense to try to push it through the lame duck session.
Well, the concern that the Democrats I hear from, like I believe the vice president and others, is Mr. Eagleburger. The concern they have about it going over into next year, when you have a much more Republican Senate, still a majority Democratic Senate nominally, but certainly much more conservatives. It's going to be harder to get the 67 2/3 vote next year than now. That's why they fear not getting it done in the lame duck. Your reaction to that?
Well, my reaction to that is that, in other words, see, this is why I'm now put in the position of being more liberal than my friend on the other side there, and I'm not liberal on this at all, except in this particular case, I think it is a treaty worth doing. However, I don't mind if it waits until next year. The fact of the matter is that Democratic argument that you just used is simply saying because we lost some Senate seats, and therefore, whatever it is, it'll be tougher for us to get because Republicans are now in those positions, is simply saying that they want to do this now that they lost their seats in the Senate. They want to do it before these lame duckers are out of there. That's not the way to move on this issue.
Well, I think they're concerned. Well, I'll express their concern since I share it, which is they're afraid that these people come in from the outside. They come in with a very anti-establishment point of view to start with, and their view will probably be...
We don't know that. We don't know it on start, at least, and the fact of the matter is, and this is the thing that I think is so important, where Mr. Feith and I probably disagree, and that is, to me, the looming worst issue we face for not just tomorrow, but for decades to come is this issue of nuclear weapons. And anything we can do to begin to shave off a little here, a little there, I think it needs to be done. And I think it's a terribly dangerous issue, and we ought to go ahead with it.
I do agree that we have to do everything we can. The thing that concerns me is some of the mistakes that were made in the negotiating of this treaty may actually make the proliferation problem harder rather than easier. On your point, I think that there are Republicans who have serious questions about the treaty who I think, if forced to vote before those questions are answered in a lame duck session, will vote no. Whereas they might be satisfied if it comes up later.
I think it's fair to say we won't prejudge them. Thank you. I know the arguments, though. Thank you. Former Secretary of State Lawrence Eagleburger, thank you. Former Undersecretary of State Doug Feith, thanks for giving us this argument tonight.